Welcome to the Innovators Insider Podcast. I am excited, as always, to join my co-host, Richard Doyle, live from Las Vegas. How are you doing, Richard?
Doing fantastic today. Although I will say one thing, I've had these headphones on all day long, and it's really making a mess of my hair. But other than that, everything's been going really great. Lots of great meetings today, and looking forward to this podcast because we've got some really great guests.
Well, I don't have any hair to worry about, Richard. So, I'm you should go my route if you want. Just take the Bic to it and do it.
Well, we might. I've got one event coming up later this year where I need long hair, so we'll just leave it. We'll just leave it at that.
I wouldn't cut it a bit if I had hair like yours, Richard. So, we got a good show today. Today we're going to talk about initiatives that we have here at PTC relating to the next generation, right? In creating a great crop of students and educators that are here for the next generation of engineering. And we have some pretty cool stuff at PTC for this, and some really awesome people that put this program or multiple programs together. So we have Dr. Matt Mueller will be joining us. We'll also have an educator, Dr. Laura Brown from Texas, joining us. And we'll also have our director here at PTC of educational programs. I can't remember the exact name of your title, Alyssa, but welcome to the show, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Hi, Alyssa. I actually wrote down the title. It's Director of Education Enablement at PTC. So, Alyssa, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what the Director of Education Enablement does at PTC.
Yeah, great. Alyssa Walker, I've been here at PTC for about 8 years. We've joked sometimes that PTC stands for Prepare to Change. And certainly in the 8 years I've been here, seen a lot of changes in the company as a whole, but in the education program as well. And I think one of the biggest changes, and for me, one of the most exciting changes, was when we acquired Onshape. That's had such a significant impact on the work that we do in the education space. Talking about what does PTC do in the education space, we've had decades-long history of working with schools and universities to share PTC's technologies with students and with educators. Going back to what you were saying, Mike, about enabling the next generation workforce, empowering them, and giving them the tools and skills that they need. We really focus on how can we provide them the technologies of the future that they'll be using as they enter the workforce, and what kinds of resources can we provide educators to help them teach those technologies. So we've been doing that for a while. And like I said, when we acquired Onshape, that was just a significant change for us in terms of being able to, I think, provide a tool to the education market that really was an excellent fit for their needs. And this was even pre-pandemic, but when COVID happened, it became even clearer how necessary and how fitting it was.
Right. Onshape, I remember, quite clearly when the acquisition happened. It was November, and everything was, great, 2019. And, a few months later, everything is just completely upside down. We didn't know what was going to happen the next day, even, let alone the next week, next month, right?
Yeah.
So when the acquisition happened and we had this Onshape ready to go, what happened to PTC? What?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we talked about the time of the acquisition. I remember I had been in a meeting, we were in a planning meeting with our education leaders just before the acquisition. We were talking about Onshape because we'd heard kind of stirrings from some of our university educators and students that we were working with, talking about how great Onshape was. And of course, at the time, it was a competitor to us as far as we knew. We didn't know that there were discussions going on about, acquiring Onshape. And literally in that discussion, we had said, if we don't do something with kind of what we're doing at PTC with our offerings for the education space, Onshape's going to kind of take over. And then I think it was about a week later, the announcement came out, that we had acquired Onshape, and we on the education team, we were so excited because we could see, just again from our work in that space, that was where things were going. That was very, students, especially students, really expect technology to work the way that SaaS works, even if they don't call it by that name, if they don't necessarily know what SaaS means.
Right, but they all know what Google
works.
Docs is.
Yep, yeah, Google Docs
Yep.
is huge in the education space. And so there was this kind of building, and we saw that. And so when, the acquisition was announced, we were all just so excited at the prospect of being able to share that, with our audience. And then as the pandemic happened and the world kind of turned upside down, it was interesting when it first, things first kind of shut down and schools shut down. We kind of had discussions amongst ourselves of, well, Onshape could be a really great tool, but we don't want to come across as kind of self-serve, because there was so much uncertainty and everything. And we started getting kind of an influx of requests and seeing an influx of signups just organically happening because teachers were desperate, looking for something to help them keep school going and keep, the instruction going, and especially the STEM and more hands-on activities going with their students. And so, we've just seen the signups continue to climb since that time. It's been remarkable to see. And again, we're sharing this and advocating. Obviously, we've got a marketing team that promotes Onshape and everything, but I think so much of what we're seeing too is just, it's the right product at the right time for this market. It's what students expect. It makes teachers' jobs so much easier as far as file management and data management and, cost and everything, because there just aren't the IT and other issues that we deal with traditional on-prem CAD.
Yeah. What are some of the surprises that you've seen in the space since we first started with Onshape? Like obviously people should be happy that it's really easy to access and they don't have to go into the CAD lab and everything. But what's been the biggest surprise to you?
I think one of the things that we weren't expecting that was really surprising, but also really exciting for us to see, was that this kind of democratization of CAD in the education space, that because everybody could access it, they didn't need a special expensive hardware, computer. A lot more students could engage in design activities than could previously. We had an educator reach out to us just of his own volition. We hadn't connected with him or anything besides, that he had access to the software, and he felt so compelled. He reached out to us to just say, thank you, and I always quote this because to me, it kind of brings things home. But, his comment was, thanks to Onshape, all of my 200 students, regardless of their socioeconomic status, can engage in CAD and design and engineering. And that was something I think we hadn't expected, is just that accessibility component that so many students who otherwise wouldn't have been able to, pandemic or not, can now access it and engage in it, and they can share it at home, and they can participate in it outside of a computer lab, and on a Chromebook.
Yeah.
So that's been, I think, pretty encouraging to see just how many more students can participate. It's not limited to the one kid on the robotics team or in the class that's got the, all the bells and whistles, software, computer, hardware.
Yeah, totally. And having access to CAD at school is so important. I wouldn't be sitting in this room with you right now if I didn't have access to CAD when I was going to school. Richard, I started on a drafting board too, Richard, but
I had access to a drafting board when I was in school, Michael.
thought so.
Thanks for bringing up my age again.
No, I got some gray hairs too, Richard. It's okay. I started on AutoCAD 4, so that tells you how old I am. I bet what kind of things, Richard, did you have questions for Alyssa?
Well, if you don't mind, Alyssa, can you talk about the Onshape for Education program that we have going on? I know it's for students and educators. Are there I imagine there are some great resources for students and the educators, different programs, even contests that come out of that every now and then. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'd love to. So Onshape for Education, it's all free. We've got 2 different plans. There's the Onshape Education Standard, which you can go onto our website, onshape.com/edu, and sign up right now and get started right away. There's no download install. So it's always important to say that because I think people are so used to having to do that and deal with that. It's amazing that you don't. So there's that free plan. There's also what we call the Education Enterprise Plan, which is for schools and institutions that are trying to implement CAD on a larger scale, maybe across a department or across even multiple schools in a district, for example. So those plans are available, again, through our website. But we also, when we first acquired Onshape, we had the Onshape Education Standard Plan, and that was it. Since that time, we instituted the Education Enterprise Plan, so a second plan. And then we've also been working really hard. We have former classroom teachers that work in the education team that bring their experience and expertise to help build resources that enable teachers and students to adopt Onshape. Because one of the things that's interesting in the education space is that it's not, you can give somebody free software, give a teacher free software, but if they don't have resources to be able to help them implement it, it's really hard to start using a new software, especially when your curriculum maybe uses a different software. And so as much as possible, we've tried to develop curriculum resources that educators can use. We have a 9 weeks worth of content that educators can implement in their classrooms called Intro to CAD, and it's 5 units of instruction. It includes all the Onshape documents, teacher guides, Google slide decks, assessments, kind of a full, complete package, so that teachers who are either new to using Onshape or want to teach their students who are new to Onshape or new to CAD can start right away. Basically, they have all the materials that they need. So we've tried to build out those resources. We also want to make it fun and engaging, and as much as possible, we try to do that through those types of resources. But we also offer competitions and run design challenges on a fairly regular basis. So we ran one during the pandemic when everything shut down. So First Robotics is a partner of ours. We're a sponsor of First Robotics, and their season kind of came to an abrupt end when COVID happened. And I had all these students who had been working so hard towards world championship and competition, and suddenly they weren't going to be able to compete anymore. And so we thought, why not do an online design competition? We can, because Onshape is fully online. And so we ran what was called Robots to the Rescue. Had a really strong response, from first teams and students who wanted to still be able to showcase their work and their design skills and their experience with robots and robotics. And so we ran that, and it was so well received, and we had so much engagement with that. Decided this is something we want to continue doing, so we continue doing. So we partner also with organizations. It's called the Rec Foundation, but they run, Vex Robotics is another one. We actually just wrapped up a competition with Vex Robotics called Nature Recovery Robots. There's another online design competition that students could participate in. And we've got some others coming in the pipeline pretty soon. So stay tuned, but that's something that we definitely want to do and provide for students, because it's a way of getting them excited, giving them a chance to showcase their work, and doing some cool prizes too.
There's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, no kidding.
A lot.
That's just fantastic. I followed the Robots to the Rescue competition very closely, and it's funny. I still find myself going to that webpage, and I just scrolled that up, and we'll certainly put it into the show notes. I still find myself going back to that webpage to see the winners of that competition and what they designed. And we were lucky enough to have the second place winner, the Purple Gears, come and do a presentation at one of our Onshape user group meetings, and they just did a fantastic job there. I love seeing these young folks or these young kids get excited about design and manufacturing. And, not only are they designing these things, they're building these things, they're tweaking these things, they're competing with these things. I think the future of engineering is pretty bright when we've got kids like this coming up through school.
Oh, yeah. I see the kinds of things that they create and design, and it makes me wonder what I was doing when I was their age.
I think the same
I was
thing.
doing stuff like that. But super impressive, and we're just so excited that we can help facilitate that in some way and encourage that. So
that's
it's
great.
been great.
Well, Alyssa, we want to thank you very much for coming on the show. I learned a lot that I didn't know already, and so I want to thank you for that. Encourage our audience to go to the education webpage and take a look, and that goes for students and educators.
Yeah, we have a ton of engineers listening to this podcast, and if you have kids, you need to go to that website right now, look at it, tell your teachers about it, tell everybody about it. If you care about the next generation, right? So it's so easy to get an Onshape account, to learn 3D CAD, to learn 3D printing, to get into that whole world. It's technology, right? And that's where we're not going backwards, right? So.
I just realized I forgot to mention one other resource, if you don't mind me throwing it in. So we've got a couple of events coming up, getting ready for the start of the school year again. So there's a research symposium that's going to be happening on Onshape Research Symposium, and I believe the other guests will talk about that. But we also have a Onshape teaching symposium, all about how you can make the most of Onshape in your instruction, and that's for K-12 educators as well as university college level educators. John McElhaney from Onshape will be offering the opening keynote. We've got some other educators that will be participating in some breakout sessions. So very interactive, in some ways, I won't say informal, but we want to give teachers a chance to interact and share ideas and get ideas for projects and see student work, things like that. So August 10th, that's happening. It's a free virtual event open to any educator who wants to participate. So I encourage any who are listening to join us and spread the word.
Great. That's awesome.
And like we say, yep. And we'll add that, definitely add that link to the show notes as well. So people can click on that while they're watching the podcast and check it out.
Awesome.
All right.
Alyssa.
Thanks again, Alyssa.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Wow, what a great interview. That was fantastic.
Absolutely. There's so many things happening. It's hard to keep track. I mean, I work here, there's so many
Same
things
here.
going
And you know what? I look at that webpage every now and then, but wow. There's a whole lot more stuff going on than I even realized. So
yeah.
Our next guest, we've got a great next guest because we've actually got an educator that is using Onshape with her students. So I want to bring in Dr. Laura Brown. She's an engineering teacher and robotics coach in the Mesquite Independent School District in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Hello, Laura. Welcome to the show.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure for sure. So I've been following you around on Twitter for a long time because I noticed your Twitter account one day and I thought, this looks like somebody that I need to follow. And we ended up connecting through messaging and worked out, had a couple of presentations from Onshape for your students. So it looks like us connecting on Twitter turned out to be a really good thing. So
yes, for sure.
So why don't we start off? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What led you to teaching and what led you into to STEAM education?
Yes. So I just wrapped up my 15th year of teaching. I joked with the kids that I have, I started my teaching in first grade. My primary experience is 8 years in first grade. I never would have imagined when I started way back when that I'd be where I am now. But, things happen and your interests change. When I was teaching first grade, I was the teacher that had my kids doing podcasts, actually. I was very interested in just education and adding in that technology aspect. And, not including technology for the sake of saying like, hey, I put technology in this lesson, but actually doing something meaningful. And so Mesquite is a great school district that had tons of resources, still does. And so we had access to things like GarageBand. And that's kind of where I started, messing with my kids, and they would write their first grade fairy tales whenever we did that, but then have them transition into doing a full-blown podcast in GarageBand, which was a huge thing, with first graders. So just kind of stuff like that, just interest really, I guess. It was just my interest in technology and how could I make things, innovative and fun for the kids and not just the monotonous worksheets and me doing all the teaching and talking. So, I transitioned up through fourth grade, added more technology in, was blessed to have extra iPads in my room. So that made things a lot more accessible. About then is when I got involved doing more of the robotics and coding and was able to do an after school coding, robotics camp with limited resources, but, there were still some there. And then transitioned up into sixth grade after a few years, and I was following the same group, and I don't think they realized that, but, so we were kind of used to each other. And, so as the ages grow, they're able to do a little more. So then I got involved in going to ed camps and learned a lot of technology things there and how to apply that, but more of the robotics and the coding, that really intrigued and interested me. And so then I moved into middle school 3 years. Yeah, I guess it's 4 years ago now. I don't know. It all blends together to where I teach the class I do now, which is a career and technology education class where the kids are exposed to the foundation for the careers and the graduation plans that they can do in high school. And that's where I've been able to add in the Onshape. I left Mesquite for 2 years. And I was trained in Project Lead the Way, which is how I actually learned about Onshape. And so, I went through wonderful training for Project Lead the Way for the 2 classes I taught and was intimidated that I signed up to essentially teach kids how to do CAD. Like I said, my background was mainly in first grade, and here I am having to teach kids how to do this. So I was like, what in the world? And then you throw in, it was the second year of the pandemic, and the kids can't really touch the resources, and the kids were somewhat virtual. They had the option at that point of being virtual or in person. So how am I going to do Project Lead the Way material with kids at home whenever I'm sitting in a classroom? And I also don't really know a lot, like I'm learning alongside them, which for me is fun. I like, being transparent and open and vulnerable with the kids. So I think that builds a better relationship. But the accessibility of Onshape really helped because I had kids at home maybe that were sharing a device with a sibling trying to do work. They had access to iPads. Some of them would try to do it on their phone, Chromebooks, laptops, like she mentioned, just no matter what kids had, they were able to do work, and we were able, to produce things and make things. And it was neat to be able to print those things off and, get them to them, or once they transition back to school in person. And then I came back to Mesquite this past school year. So I brought that Onshape with me, just the ability, again, the accessibility for kids to be able to make and create. And, it's intimidating, I think, because they see the 3D printers in my room and they're like, ooh, make me this. And they find it on the website. And I'm like, no, like make something yourself. Like, I mean, it may not look identical because the value and the worth is so much different whenever they're like, look, I made this. And as this past school year progressed, I had kids that were like, hey, my mom's birthday or it's Mother's Day, can I make something? And I was like, of course you can, and so they use the skills that they have to make something. And that's, so meaningful, and it's something that's memorable to them. And, hopefully they take that with them and consider doing engineering or design. And like Richard mentioned, I think the ability for the 2 people to come in that actually work for, PTC and Onshape. And we have a large Hispanic population at our school right now. And so it meant a lot for those students to see people that look like them, both a male and a female, and that's something that they could do because they don't necessarily think that's an option for them, but they just saw 2 people, that use Onshape, this thing Miss Brown has them using, and look at the things that they do with it. So that was really neat as well.
And I know both of them very much enjoy presenting for your class. I talked to both of them afterwards, and they were just really excited about it.
Oh, yes, it was neat.
Yep. So what are some of the projects that the kids have worked on? Is there anything that stands out? anything in particular? Or?
I mean, so like I said, my class is an intro class. So we exposed them. The classes I taught last year was the principles of applied engineering. So that's like more of an advanced class. But I also have semester long classes where they're doing investigating careers. So we try to give them an exposure to STEM was one of the classes I taught, and the other one was computer science. So we start very basic. I have these. This is, it's just something simple, but having them figure out how to make something like this in Onshape. I mean, for a middle school student that has no engineering design background, is huge for them to see. They start looking at things, I guess, in a different way because they look at the simple shapes. Okay, how can I put a circle on that? The view, and then how can I make it bigger? And then they learn those words like extrude and, the dimensioning and things like that. And it's just, those are the things that they start with. And then they, mess with their, like, what else can I do? Well, I can shell it and make a cup. So let's print out a cup and see if it holds any water, like those types of things. For them, it's more experimental and exposure to see what they can make.
And I've seen some of the pictures of some of your classes up on Twitter, and I noticed that there's smiles on just about every kid's face. So I know they're really having a good time and really enjoying it.
Yes.
I don't know how I would have felt if my first grade teacher followed me all the way through to middle school, but have you reached the top rung of the ladder? Or are you looking to move even further and possibly follow these kids into high school?
Well, I'm at the wrong, the feeder pattern for how our district is to follow them into high school, but I did make a promise to them, and it's on video now. So they're going to hold me to it even more. But I told them it was some of the same group that I had in first, fourth, sixth, and seventh grade. There'll now be juniors this coming year in high school. And I told them somehow I would be at their graduation and figure out how to hand them their diploma. And some of their parents have reached out to me and said they still remember that. So I've got a little work to do in the next 2 school years to figure out how to make that happen. But I think it's awesome, just the connections. And, I don't think they got tired of me. I hope not.
No, I can hear the passion in your voice, and I know you're going to make that happen.
Yes,
whatever
somehow.
you have to do for your kids and for your students, I know you will do. Michael, any questions for Laura?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Laura, for sharing your stories. It makes me really happy and brings puts a smile on my face for sure. When it comes to when you had to transition to Onshape, what would you tell other peers, about transitioning to something like Onshape from another CAD design tool in school? Is it a fairly easy thing to do? It's obviously, there's time that it takes to learn and figure out how to teach a new way of doing things. But, what would you tell other educators, and what would you, and what is your experience like as well?
Well, so like I said, I have no background in CAD and engineering. It's just kind of an interest, and then I had to learn it to some extent, but I've enjoyed learning more in the process. It's very user friendly. I would say that, for somebody that knew very little, I had learned Fusion through Project Lead the Way, but then again, looking for a resource to make it accessible for all of my students whenever I knew that they all wouldn't be in person 2 school years ago now. So, everything it still works the same, I would say, as software that's out there. But I think it's just the whole accessibility thing that is amazing, that you don't have, that it's cloud-based, I guess, you're able to share and collaborate. And that's been a lot, a time saver for me, as well, and an ability to help the kids. Like, if they're working on something and it doesn't work right, let's say they try to extrude it or add a shell or whatever they do to it, or the text is wonky whenever they, whatever they do, they can share it with me. We can kind of look at it together. That's very nice feature.
Yeah.
I would say to somebody that's more familiar probably than I am using CAD, that it's an easy transition. I mean, I knew very little and I felt very successful in Onshape. So, I think the things may, be in a different place, but all the features are there that you would have somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's easy to use, and it made me feel very comfortable using it with little to no knowledge.
Great. And what is the computing platform of choice that you see most often? Is it Mac, Chromebook, Windows, iPads?
Our district is one-to-one Chromebook as a result of the pandemic. And so our students used a lot of the Chromebooks. And then I'm also fortunate enough with the class I teach to also have essentially a computer lab in my room. We transitioned from Mac to PC for this coming school year. So, but I mean, what the thing with Onshape is I don't really have to worry. It'll work on anything. So that's something that's easy for me.
Totally. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So that's awesome. I'm so excited for you and your students and your school district. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your stories. Richard.
Thank you.
Anything else for Laura?
Just that I'm like you, fascinated by the story. Dr. Brown, I'm going to continue to follow you around on Twitter and watch your progress and watch your student progress. Would you like other people to follow you? I could put your Twitter handle up there.
Sure, you go right ahead.
All right. You can follow Dr. Brown at twitter.com/TX Teach and Learn. Yeah. And I highly recommend giving her a follow. Very interesting.
And I will say too, there's a great Onshape community. Like once you start tagging Onshape or mentioning Onshape or even PTC, you see all of the resources and people and all the things they're doing as well. So it's a great resource. And you find people like Richard on there.
Well, that's great. Well, Dr. Brown, Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And good luck in the future. And like I say, I'll be watching along.
Thank you.
See you later. Oh.
No. Can't you just hear the passion in her voice?
I'm so happy there are people out there like Laura to help make our next generation great. It's so nice to hear these stories.
I still wouldn't have wanted my first grade teacher to follow me to middle school.
Well, it depends on the teacher.
So we're going to get technical now, aren't we?
I think so.
Still in the education space, but we're going to get pretty technical here. Let's bring our next guest, Mike.
Yeah, let's bring in Dr. Matt Mueller of PTC. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Love your background, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the blueprint style, diagrams. But Richard, your sepia style prints as well look very nice. Yeah, I'm jealous because all I have here is this drab wall behind me today, and not in my normal podcast studio.
You mentioned sepia. I have a sepia story that we'll tell on some other episode.
Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. What you do at PTC, and then we'll get into some fun techno stuff.
Sounds great. So I've been with PTC Education for a little bit under 2 years now. Before joining PTC Education, I did a PhD in mechanical engineering at Tufts University, and my research focus there was really on engineering education. So my PhD was focused on designing and developing learning environments that enabled students from middle school up through undergraduate engineering students to engage with real-world engineering practices. And then here at PTC, my title now is Manager of Education Innovation. And what that means is I get to work with faculty members from around the world who are doing cool cutting-edge research and pushing the boundaries of how Onshape can be used to have students engage in things that until Onshape, they haven't been able to engage with, things like data management, product lifecycle management, configurations, feature script, REST API, how computation is informing design now. All of these things were just too complex for teachers to really get into with students. But now with Onshape, the technology really just gets out of the way. Great stories from Dr. Brown and Alyssa about how Onshape is just so accessible and students can just hop right in, create accounts, and be CADing in minutes.
Right.
And so my focus is really pushing the ceiling. So we've successfully lowered the barriers to entry very, very significantly with Onshape's architecture, but there's so many possibilities that Onshape poses that have not been possible before.
Yeah, I don't think it can be understated, that accessibility, especially when it comes to doing like customizing a CAD system or customizing how you construct geometry in a CAD system. To be able to do that requires typically a lot of programming set up on a local machine, right? To kind of get things going. You need compilers, you need, well, I'll let you explain it, Matt.
Yeah. So, in terms of traditional CAD, you need a powerful workstation with the installed application and licenses that need to be updated and worry about version skew and all those things. With Onshape, it just gets out of the way and works just as well as on a Chromebook as it does on a $5,000 GPU desktop.
Right.
So in terms of getting into a professional grade CAD system, that's, as accessible as can be.
Right. But when you start getting into like furthering, like, customizing an API and things like that, that's where it really gets complicated, right?
Yep. And I think feature script being open sourced and accessible to anyone is such a huge opportunity that I think the community is just scratching the surface of. There's companies out there, and I know you've had folks on the podcast who have talked about how they're investing a lot of resources in developing their own custom features to optimize and automate their workflows. But from an educational standpoint, you now have a playground that's pre-configured, pre-set up. You have a part studio, you have an assembly, you have a feature studio. And within the feature studio, you have all the code snippets that you need to get started. And you're getting to engage with a user interface design, with mathematical, computational design. And as a teacher, all of those barriers are out of the way. You have everything just pre-set up for free, and students can engage in these computational thinking practices, which often are hard to really get into. But all the research shows that it's so important for young students to start understanding how code works and what computation actually is.
Right. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. I'm going to kind of wing it here for a second now. And I'm going to share my screen here. This is our tech tip coming soon here, but let me switch the tab to something else here. All right, here we go. I'm going to jump into a different document. I don't want to work in the factory today. It's nice. I'd rather be on the beach. Although this podcast studio is quite nice, right, Alyssa?
Very nice.
Let's see here. I am going to jump into actually, let's do this. Let's jump into a blank document. All right. So we're doing the podcast. And to create a custom feature, Onshape, you don't have to open up Visual Basic. You don't have to do any of the, have any other programs on your computer, right? You're able to create feature studios inside of Onshape. And this tab is now added to your document. And now you can start creating new features right on the fly. Like, here's the name of my feature. What do I want it to add? I need a query, right, to start, I need to interrogate something to make a slot. Maybe I draw a line and I want it to do something, right? So I need a query, right? So I'm not going to do a whole program here, and it would look terrible probably if I tried doing a slide. But I just want to talk about that because getting in right away and being able to do this with full version control, with sharing with each other, and even co-editing together. Just this kind of cool. You can actually have two people editing code at the same time, code snippets inside a feature, inside of a custom feature that you create, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by easy, right? And being able to share this information and use this information across your organization or with coworkers or people on contests like the robotics, right? I think they use a lot of custom features, right?
The first robotics teams in high school are one of the biggest users of feature script and custom features, and they're creating some pretty complex, computationally intricate custom features to help with their robot design. And these are high schoolers, and all we've done is give them the playground and boy, they're going gangbusters, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do when they graduate college. Because it's just such a new way of thinking about how you can design parametrically using code. You just have so much more control and so much more power.
We're all going to be working for them.
Yeah, they're fearless, aren't they?
Truly.
Yeah.
But you can even take it to another level, right? By using the Onshape API, application programming interface. Maybe you could do just a quick 2-second intro of like what the API is, why people should care about it, and maybe an example or two of how to use it and how to use it in a feature script kind of way where it's like no software to install. Like, I'll let you riff on that.
So maybe I'll just give a quick background on what the REST API is. So this is a pretty standard protocol that all cloud-based applications have. So I like to use Google Home as an example. I have Philips Hue lights set up in my house, and I can tell Google to turn on and off my lights. And the way it works is with a REST API. Google will send a message over the local network to my Hue lights, and that will tell them to turn on and off. And Onshape provides a similar REST API that allows anyone using any coding language to access the server stack, essentially, that you're using the same servers when you're actually modeling in Onshape. So this opens up a whole world of possibilities. In the past, CAD systems have had APIs that you can run just locally on your computer, but because Onshape is cloud native, you can access the REST API from anywhere in the world with any internet connected coding system. So this creates so many opportunities for automation and integration at the industrial level, and it's how all the apps in Onshape's App Store interact with your documents and get data or update your document. But we also see a big opportunity for teaching, and you can now use Onshape to show these kind of complex 3D concepts that you have to spend years of an engineering undergrad degree going through these engineering science courses, and you don't really get how it's tied to the physical world and tied to design. I was close to quitting engineering when I had to go through fluid dynamics and heat transfer because I didn't what's the point? But now if you have an Onshape document where you can clearly see what this 3D system you're analyzing is, you can use Python notebooks or some kind of open source, easy to get started with interface to start coding and analyzing your geometries, which is a whole new way of interacting with it.
Is there a place where people can find out or learn more on how to kind of get started with this? You've been talking about Google Colab is a nice way of kind of hosting, REST API kind of interaction with Onshape.
Yeah, so this is something we're actively working on our team is lowering the barrier to entry to interacting with this REST API. Maybe I can quickly share my screen and see if
that'd be great.
There's something we can show. So
I will add.
Are we seeing the screen?
We're seeing your screen. Yes.
Cool. So this is just a simple sketch that I have, and it's a strand beast walking mechanism. And what I have here is configuration variables that allow you to change the kind of crank position, as well as a configuration variable that allows you to change the crank length. So using those two parameters, I can come into this Google Colab Python notebook, which is Jupyter notebooks hosted through the cloud. And I'll certainly wave a bunch of hands as to what's happening here. But in the end, all I'm doing is going through a couple of for loops and hitting each of those variables. So I'm going through a full rotation of that crank here from 0 to 360 degrees. And then I'm iterating over a number of those different crank lengths. And I can see how that changes the tip position of that walking mechanism. And you can, extrapolate from here any kind of mechanism analysis you might want to do when you're designing a car suspension or something like that. But for education, again, you have this 3D interactive real contextualized model for what you're analyzing, and then you can understand kind of the analysis and computation behind it without
that's it's amazing.
too much extra work.
That you're able to do that in a browser, nothing to set up, and that's real engineering information that you're extracting from this. It's a real design tool, and you're using this to help you make better business and engineering decisions. So it's really good. That's really cool. And I think, Richard, we have a user group meeting going on that probably just happened, right? We're recording this ahead of the actual event, obviously.
Yeah, but I'll just go ahead and say right now, it was a great meeting.
Yes, it certainly was.
But we'll put links to all the things that we were just talking about here. Are there any other things, Matt, that you wanted to bring up? There was another symposium going on, right?
Yeah, I think that's the last thing I'd love to highlight. So we've seen the research community adopting these computational tools, feature script, and the REST API. I didn't even mention user analytics, but through the Onshape Enterprise, you can aggregate all of the user actions that happen on design teams and gain so much new insight into how engineers actually design and work together. So seeing all of this kind of momentum and the research community start to leverage all that Onshape has to offer, we put together this research symposium happening on August 3rd, an entirely virtual event. And there are exciting keynotes from researchers who are doing computational design and user analytics and a whole student poster competition. So it should be a great event. I'm super excited for it.
Excellent. We'll see you all there. I think that is all we have time for today.
Yeah,
we had an action-packed show. We're almost 50 minutes here. So,
and you know what? And we're not quite done yet because we've got a really cool model of the week. So we can go ahead and show that real quickly. I want to thank Matt for coming on the show and his presentation. I found myself in the same situation that I find myself in the German language Onshape user group meetings. I don't understand a single thing that's happening, but I can see that it's something awesome. So thank you for that, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Yep. All right. Let's take a look at our
model of the week.
And this is a really cool one. I saw this when they posted, the model of the week. And I said, you know what? We've got to have that one on the show. When I looked at this, I was just amazed. Not just by the way this thing looks and the way this thing works. We've got this great mate down here, the Revolut mates, that you can animate this clock.
That looks really good.
Yep, and it just works. It just works like Onshape should. What I think what stood out to me in the first place was the 7-segment displays. I started my career working for a digital scale company, and maybe the first time I ever saw a 7-segment display with an LED was my first day on the job when I started looking at some of their projects. So this is a wonderful model. We'll have the link for it in the show notes. I would really like to take this and 3D print all the parts that I could and actually put this thing together myself. So I might be looking for some spare 3D printer time if anybody's got any out there. And let's see if we can go ahead and build this thing.
Yeah, it looks amazing. And yeah, to get gearing and everything there, that's great.
Yep. So that's our model of the week. Fantastic.
Great.
Yep, it has been a great show. Let's bring everybody back for a final goodbye. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's bring back Dr. Brown. Hi. And Dr. Mueller. Alyssa had to just run out right now. Cece just left and waved goodbye earlier, but Alyssa Walker, so happy to have her on the meeting, and it's so nice to see you all here today. Thanks so much for joining us for the show. Any last parting words, Richard?
Just real quickly, I forgot to go ahead and give credit for that model of the week. So I just wanted to let everybody know that was created by Matthew Wilson and James McClurlin.
Excellent.
That's a hard one to say, especially with my dentures. Dr. Brown, Matt, thank you so much. Thank you very much
for having us.
And we hope we'll get to talk to you again in the future. So long.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody.